Listen to the cry of a woman in labor at the hour of giving birth. Look at the dying man's struggle at his last extremity, and then tell me whether something that begins and ends thus could be intended for enjoyment. Face the facts of being what you are, for that is what changes what you are. There is nothing with which every man is so afraid as getting to know how enormously much he is capable of doing and becoming. How absurd men are! They never use the liberties they have. They demand those they do not have. They have freedom of thought. They demand freedom of speech. People demand freedom of speech as a compensation for the freedom of thought, which they seldom use. There are two ways to be fooled. One is to believe what isn't true. The other is to refuse to believe what is true. People understand me so poorly that they don't even understand my complaint about them not understanding me. The tyrant dies, and his rule is over. The martyr dies, and his rule begins. I see it all perfectly. There are two possible situations. One can either do this or that. My honest opinion and my friendly advice is this: do it or do not do it. You will regret both. Above all, do not lose your desire to walk. Every day, I walk myself into a state of well-being and walk away from every illness. I have walked myself into my best thoughts. The proud person always wants to do the right thing, the great thing, but because he wants to do it in his own strength, he is fighting not with men, but with God. To dare is to lose one's footing momentarily. Not to dare is to lose oneself. What if everything in the world were a misunderstanding? What if laughter were really tears? The task must be made difficult, for only the difficult inspires the noble-hearted. What is a poet? An unhappy man who dies deep anguish in his heart, but whose lips are so formed that when the sigh and cry pass through them, it sounds like lovely music. If anyone on the verge of action should judge himself according to the outcome, he would never begin. Why bother remembering a past that cannot be made into a present? Truth always rests with a minority, and the minority is always stronger than the majority, because the minority is generally formed by those who really have an opinion. Therefore, do not deceive yourself. Of all deceivers, fear most yourself. Life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. It is perfectly true, as philosophers say, that life must be understood backwards, but they forget the other proposition, that it must be lived forwards. present state of the world and the whole of life is diseased. If I were a doctor and were asked for my advice, I should reply, create silence. Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. If I were to wish for anything, I should not wish for wealth and power, but for the passionate sense of the potential, for the eye which, ever young and ardent, sees the possible. But by sitting still, and the more one sits still, the closer one comes to feeling ill. Thus, if one just keeps on walking, everything will be all right. The self-assured believer is a greater sinner in the eyes of God than the troubled disbeliever. It is very important in life to know when your cue comes. It is perhaps the misfortune of my life that I am interested in far too much, but not decisively, in any one thing. All my interests are not subordinated in one, but stand on an equal footing. Life has its own hidden forces, which you can only discover by living. Far from idleness being the root of all evil, it is rather the only true good. It is the duty of the human understanding to understand that there are things which it cannot understand. The function of prayer is not to influence God, but rather to change the nature of the one who prays. Leap of faith, yes, but only after reflection. In addition to my other numerous acquaintances, I have one more intimate confidant. My depression is the most faithful mistress I have known.